Iraq, May 2004. Her name was Miriam, and she was a beautiful 20-year-old girl with classic Arabic features. Very dark and expressive eyes, black hair, a perfectly proportioned nose and lips that tasted like honey, and a mouth that promised heaven. She was dressed in Western style, a modest dress that could not hide her slender figure and only hinted at her charms above and below. She was about 5'6" and weighed no more than 120 pounds. Sergeant Ben Frenchy Francois saw her on the street and reflexively tried to get to know her. He himself was only 24 years old and was very much enjoying life, even in Iraq. He simply smiled at her and tried to start a conversation, not even knowing if she spoke English. "Risk is a noble cause," was his personal motto in interpersonal relationships. Of course, in this still tense socio-political post-war environment, there were very strict rules against fraternization. The short war is over, and now the "you broke it, now it's yours" phase has arrived. General Tommy Franks designed, planned, and carried out a brilliant war. During the planning stage, most of his political superiors almost committed to using a massive invasion force. Colin Powell, now Secretary of State, was a leading proponent of this strategy, which was very successful during Gulf War I in 1990, when more than 500,000 coalition forces were involved in victory, but it was only a limited victory. Yes, it freed Kuwait and punished Saddam, but it also left a megalomaniacal dictator in power. The expectation that Saddam and his regular military forces would be so weakened that his own domestic enemies would overthrow him never materialized. And his battle formation, which remained intact, was still large enough to rank among the 10 largest in the world, at least in terms of numbers. For a long time, the founding doctrine of the U.S. military was preponderance of weapons and associated supporting logistics. It didn't quite work in Vietnam in terms of winning, and yet it worked. The U.S. military won every major battle and campaign in this war. Even the Tet Offensive of 1968 was a major disaster for the Communists militarily. The Viet Cong, the South Vietnamese communist rebels, virtually ceased to exist after this. Only NVA regulars and North Vietnamese irregulars continuing to infiltrate the South maintained heavy fighting. But the Communists convinced Walter Cronkite that they were winning with this offensive, and Cronkite influenced many other liberal Americans and politicians who so bungled the war that in the end all was lost. More than 50,000 brave American soldiers and millions of equally brave South Vietnamese allies paid the ultimate price for so many needless American policy mistakes, and with such little result. And now a dubious war was brewing again. Franks trusted his staff and fought the political battles to fight this war his way, if there was to be one. Military technology has changed greatly in the decade since Gulf War I. Smart weapons have truly become smart. Speed and accuracy had always been force multipliers, and the new army was faster and smarter than ever before. C2, Command and Control, the doctrine is now extended to C4. Command, control, communications, and computers. Massive armies increased complexity in every way and slowed down everything. Transportation and logistics problems inevitably multiplied, and all this became much more expensive. Frank's original plan involved a two-pronged invasion following a massive shock and awe campaign of targeted bombing. One offensive was to start from Turkey and had two goals. 1. To protect our Kurdish allies already under our no-fly zone protection from Saddam's oppression, and 2. To simply tie up large forces of Iraqi troops, artillery, and armor in the north, while the main invasion will begin from another location. Another offensive step came from the traditional South Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. The total coalition force this time consisted of fewer than 200,000 men, and these forces could be coordinated and assembled, and then employ C4 much more easily and quickly than any force larger than 500,000. But then Turkey, for its own socio-political reasons, refused to allow a large number of coalition forces to be stationed on its territory or an attack on Iraq from Turkish territory. Time for Plan B. Franks, Colin Powell, and ultimately Bush himself pressured the Turks to at least allow the decision to be kept secret publicly. Frank's campaign then deployed masking, a Russian term for a deceptive maneuver at least as old as Sun Tzu. They simply pretended the invasion was still coming from Turkey and leaked the information, and even if Saddam's spies in Turkey were reporting otherwise, Saddam was paranoid enough to keep significant forces in the north, just in case. Well, we all know what happened and how short the actual invasion and conventional war was. We also know that tens of thousands of Iraqi prisoners quickly surrendered, but there were also hundreds of thousands who simply took off their uniforms and deserted. In fact, virtually every Iraqi man in uniform has done so, especially the internal security forces, but the regular police forces too. This really brought the country into chaos. It is simply not true that Franks and his team, or Powell and President Bush, did not think at all about post-war scenarios. Their basic plan was to use existing Iraqi forces and command structures after the removal of the leader Saddam, his sons and other top associates to continue the country's police and administrative functions during the transition to Western democracy, while trying to maintain the lowest possible profile of the occupation. Try to minimize daily clashes between non-Muslim invaders and Muslim Iraqis. Yes, I know, It's a shame that no one in the Bush administration with any real power or influence seems to have ever read Howard Bloom's book, The Lucifer Principle, or thought about it. But in hindsight, we can look at everything with clarity. But any more detailed planning after was pointless. No one could know exactly how quickly or how long the main war might last. Maybe some of Saddam's forces will just get lucky. Maybe he has and is using even more biochemical weapons than planned. Initially, almost all American ground forces entered prepared for biochemical attacks. Many were already equipped. This had little impact on their own combat effectiveness, but they were so highly trained that this was only a minor irritation and obstacle. Maybe the war will become a multi-year conflict, like Vietnam or like Afghanistan for the Russians. It was necessary to win the war first, and preferably as quickly as possible, and with the least possible losses to coalition forces and truly innocent Iraqi non-combatants. Well, one of the two is not bad. Sometimes that's not good either. In any case, only a few were initially introduced military policemen, and they were all combat line military policemen assigned more to combat missions than actual police work. But after a massive prisoner situation arose, many more military police were sent, including John Thornton, Jack Clark, Ben Francois, and Jason Dunbar. They were all in the same unit, which was initially involved in guarding prisoners and interrogating some officers. They were all E5 rank senior sergeants, but John was the senior rank and was on his way to becoming a technical 31D special investigations agent. By May 2004, they had largely moved into the role of instructors training the new group of Iraqi civilian police that were now needed. Sometimes they also participated in the investigation of military police criminal offenses, especially in cases of suspected joint criminal activity between the U.S. Army and Iraq, such as the theft selling of U.S. Army weapons or other supplies for money or valuable Iraqi antiques stolen in the chaos when Baghdad fell so suddenly. And then one day Frenchie saw Miriam. It was a bad day. Maybe one of the worst in retrospect for both of us. Frenchie chased after her, of course, almost out of habit. Miriam ran as expected, knowing it was the smart thing to do. She was a very smart and strong-willed young woman. But there was something special about Frenchie. He was mysterious, much more so than any other American she had met and talked to. And he had the kindest eyes, it seemed, when she looked into them, catching his gaze and smile. So Miriam didn't run too fast or too far, and she let Frenchie catch up with her. They somehow managed to spend time together. John and his close friends soon found out about this and warned him to be careful, very careful. John was now the E6 technical sergeant and effectively Frenchie's immediate superior and was starting to really worry about him. Miriam's family found out too and tried to warn her to get her to stop seeing Frenchie. They were Muslims, but only social Muslims, doing enough so as not to upset their many neighbors and friends, but nothing could appease the few fanatical Sunni Islamic radicals they inevitably knew. Miriam's father loved her and wanted his beautiful daughter to be happy. He was already gently resisting many of the requests for potentially very good marriages that so many of his friends and acquaintances were proposing for their sons, cousins, or Miriam's nephews. He was quite comfortable waiting until Miriam made it clear what her own preferences were in matters of her heart. But he felt cold and afraid about the path she was now on. And then one day Frenchie went on leave without permission. Damn it, John thought. Frenchie was absent from his barracks for almost 48 hours straight. It was Friday night when Frenchie went out alone and never returned. He had no specific duties until Monday at 8 a.m., but he was not allowed to be absent. They were all on call for any other police tasks that might be required. John thought he knew where Frenchie probably was and made his decision on Sunday afternoon. He called Jack and Jason. "Get ready. We're going to go on a little patrol trip and try to get Frenchie's head out of his own ass." Being AWOL in the combat zone that was still Iraq could very well mean years in Leavenworth if Frenchie was charged and convicted at a general court-martial. Crap. John thought Frenchie might have used the apartment, which the unit sometimes used as a safe house, for meetings with Iraqi informants who were willing to trade information, often turning in their own accomplices for the promise of extradition to the US, or sometimes simply to Italy or the UK. So he registered the Humvee, and they drove to that house and drove past it. Two Iraqi police cadets they knew stood at the entrance to the building looking out rather than in, M16s at the ready. John felt something wrong. This could be bad. We go around the corner and park. Let's check the back entrance through the alley. Maybe it will be clear. And it was clean there. Everyone quietly walked up the stairs to the third floor. The door was closed, but not guarded, at least from the outside. They approached carefully and listened. It was quite quiet, then there was a slap and a groan. John simply nodded and Jack tried the door. It wasn't locked. He opened it slowly and carefully and stepped back. John kicked the door hard and walked in quickly with his Mossberg shotgun at the ready. They were very surprised. Two more Iraqi police cadets held the head of Frenchie, who was sitting in a chair and handcuffed, while Lieutenant Heron, the leader of the police squad they were helping to train, was about to hit Frenchie in the face with something that he was now trying to hide from those who entered. Frenchie was completely naked. "Nobody moves," John said calmly. "What's going on here?" was his next question. "Oh, Sergeant Thornton, it's good that you came. We came too late to save poor Miriam, but not Frenchie," Heron lied smoothly. John didn't believe it. Heron was a slimy bastard who acted arrogantly and spoke excellent English with a high-class British accent. He came from a wealthy Baathist family and was educated at Cambridge. His family was trying to return to positions of political power in the new Iraq, and control influence within the police force was always important. This was the task of Heron's youngest son for now. "We think it was Brother Miriam and her cousins who found them here in this bed together." Jack and Jason had their carbines ready. John looked and saw poor beauty Miriam, naked and dead. She was killed, but other large bruises were visible on her body. John did not want to think about what else had been done to her, but his own education and experience immediately showed him what had been done to her. Damn, 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 that was all he could feel. We were just releasing Sergeant Francois and were about to return him to base. Heron continued smoothly while John thought, lies, lies, and damn lies. "Uncuff him. Careful," John warned. Frenchie groaned a little and was ready to fall out of his chair. "Jack, hold him," John said. "You two go to that corner. Heron, you are coming with us, and I guarantee you a bullet in the back of the head if there is any trouble with our return. Got it?" Heron's eyes flashed with anger and hatred for a second, then he smiled disarmingly. "Of course, Sergeant, we're all on the same side here at the end of the day. There won't be any problems. I'm very sorry that all of this happened. So many Iraqis are still very upset about the non-Muslim occupying forces, old man." Now he was trying to be charming in a British way. They returned safely. It was a truly tense feeling until they got into their armored HMMWV and got out of the area. Frenchie was badly beaten. He had several broken ribs, a broken nose, and several broken teeth. But his emotional pain was the most important thing. It was Heron and his gang who did it. This was the first time Frenchie and Miriam were able to be intimate. He loved her, and she loved him, and they did plan to get married, even if Frenchie had to become a Muslim to do it at least, until he could get his new bride out of the country and back home. Maybe Heron wanted her too. Who knows? They must have been keeping an eye on Miriam before they met. Frenchie needed medical attention, but simply going to the infirmary would raise a lot of questions that were best left unanswered. One of the best doctors, whom John and Frenchie knew and trusted, was called and gave Frenchie all the help he could. Damn, he's in pretty sad shape. He might even have a few broken ribs, and he'll probably need to evacuate to Ramsden. If there are any complications, I'll make a fuss. Got it? Thanks, Jimbo, just do the best you can now, and if he doesn't start to get better immediately and steadily, I'll put him on the plane myself, John promised. Okay? All I can do is fix the ribs a little and show you how to do it. Here are 2 ampoules for pain already off the table, so don't worry. Morphine ampoules were very carefully accounted for, obviously. Don't give him anything other than aspirin or ibuprofen tonight and tonight. Increasing pain is the best indicator that something may be going seriously wrong, but if that doesn't happen, he can use one tomorrow night for sleep and then maybe one the next night. And then just aspirin or ibuprofen, just in case I can't get back to it in the next few days. Frenchie gradually recovered, but it took him a full week before he could return to his real job. His team had his back, but it was close a few times. Luckily, their lieutenant was not a hands-on person and basically let John lead the unit on what was, for him, a low-priority training mission. The only time the lieutenant really got excited was when they were assigned some kind of criminal investigation, and he could play Columbo, which was completely impossible with the Iraqis. But it was fun for the team. Frenchie's face was still quite swollen and bruised when he finally returned to training his Iraqi brothers, and John noticed Heron smirking at him several times. The team members were very careful to observe each other as they conducted the training. They didn't need training for accidents or direct attacks from green on blue. It took John 3 weeks to catch Heron more or less alone on the street at dusk, close to night. Heron had the usual 2 men with him, but Jack Carter and Jason helped distract them all. Jack called out and approached Heron from one direction. As they turned to him, John came up behind him and tapped Heron on the shoulder. John was dressed in Iraqi civilian clothes, and his face was almost completely covered by an Arab keffiyeh. Heron turned to him, and John shot him with the liberated Russian Makarov PM 9mm pistol, which he immediately threw back. Why tap on the shoulder? John wanted him to see his eyes and the gun and know what awaited him. It was personal. John then turned the corner as Jack and Jason pulled out their guns and started yelling at the guards to get medical help now. It was subtle, but it worked long enough. John disappeared like smoke in the wind and then reappeared in fullest army uniform and rode up in a Humvee to pick up Jack and Jason and expressed his sincere condolences for Heron's untimely death and even a promise to help find the killer. Heron's guards and his other henchmen quickly realized that they were Americans. The atmosphere at the joint training sessions became very tense after that. It's funny, but John and his team were assigned to investigate Heron's murder. It didn't take long to discover that Heron was indeed involved in all sorts of corruption and crime, from extortion schemes from innocent Iraqi merchants to the buying and selling on the black market of all types of illegal goods, especially weapons and explosives used to kill the occupiers with wides. John and his guys took a part of Heron's organization and even pinned the murder on one of his men with enough planted evidence to make it look like an internal struggle for power and control, and the framed guy then died in a shootout when they tried to arrest him. It's good that he died, but their own effectiveness in learning was now greatly reduced, and they no longer had the desire to continue. Especially Frenchie's. All 4 were mercifully transferred back to the States early and put into the role of trainers for other military police officers before their own deployments. All 4 had planned to be in the military for life up to this point, but 3 did not renew their contracts. Only Jason remained. Jack and John returned home to St. Louis and Frenchie returned home to Mobile, Alabama. 9 years later. Frenchie. I'm almost back to normal and have had a pretty good 5 years. The first couple of years after Miriam were really hard for me. A couple of months after that darkest Sunday, I was completely healed physically and thought maybe mentally as well, when Jack Carter told me what happened to Heron. Some justice was done, but it did not bring Miriam back. I started drinking and partying again. Always been a pretty heavy weekend drinker since my college days in Alabama. But back in the day, it was always social drinking for fun. But for the first 2 years after, well, I drank almost every day so I could get alcohol. When we returned to the States, I drank every night and started relationships with anyone young or old, beautiful or not so beautiful, single or married. I did not care. All they had to do was show that they agreed, and I was more than ready after a few drinks anyway. I still had my strength and attractiveness, plus my charm and sincerity. I was successful almost every night I wasn't blackout drunk, and sometimes on those nights too. But I quickly learned that I shouldn't try to sleep with these women. I scared too many people with my nightmares and tossing around. And when my nightmares or the women themselves woke me up, I only wanted to be alone. Several women tried to console me, thinking that we might have a real connection. But I wasn't interested in that. It was a bad 2 years, then it gradually got better. I even started cutting down on my drinking. My priest helped a little. The mobile police psychologist I finally went to was a little more helpful. Mostly, my friends and family in Mobile have helped me a lot, especially just being around happy kids. But I still had my demons, and I probably wouldn't have done what I did to Jenny's ex-husband if it weren't for the memories of Miriam and what happened to her right in front of me while I was helpless and helpless. Could have intervened and stopped it. And now, after a pretty good 5 years, I'm back to that carefree, cheerful, let the good times roll guy, at least externally. But inside, I was no longer the same as I was before Miriam. I knew this and learned to just live with it. Older doesn't necessarily mean wiser, sometimes it's just sadder. And then she came into my life, Jiggy. She was a distant relative of one of Jenny's best friends, who wasn't actually related to us by blood. She herself moved to Mobile from some small town in Louisiana just for a change. She was strikingly beautiful in her own way, and yet, as soon as I saw her, she reminded me of my lost love. And the more I talked to her, the more striking the similarities became. Like Miriam at first, Jiggy was very reserved and reserved. My best efforts to interest her elicited only polite responses, and yet she always was polite and just plain nice. As if she wasn't trying to reject me or shoot me. He just might not be interested in anything other than a very casual dating type interaction. She herself was only 20 years old, exactly the same age as Miriam. Shy due to her youth and inexperience, almost the same way she once behaved. And then, the more I tried to be close to her, which was not much at first, the more I wanted to be near her. One day, I realized that 2 months had passed since I first met Jiggy, and I hadn't dated anyone else and had only had a few drinks with the guys from work and came home early each time. And most of all, I always looked forward to seeing her next time. Am I suddenly back to my 13-year-old self? I laughed at myself, and it was just a good feeling that I haven't felt in 9 years. The next time I saw her was at one of the family's monthly parties, this time at my Uncle Jeffrey's house, where Aunt Helena was running all the food and refreshments with the usual host of helping hands, including my sister Jenny and cousin Carla. A beautiful young woman like Jiggy would have all sorts of guys hanging around her, and many of them approached her, but none stayed for long, and she didn't even dance. I was determined to make her laugh and then dance or maybe die trying. I would make her interact one way or another. If she finally did shoot me completely, I wouldn't be happy, but I could live with it and move past it. Maybe. Hi, Cher. How are you? I asked with my best smile. Her lips twitched, almost a smirk, and I smiled even wider. Hello, Frenchman, she replied, exaggerating my practically useless nickname in this crowd. Aren't you too old to be trying to flirt with me? She added. I was almost speechless. This was by far the most genuine, perhaps flirtatious, response I had ever received from her. Maybe Cher, maybe I'm not as old as you think. Grandpa, I think you're too old to keep up with me on the dance floor. She smiled back, but actually blushed. Oh, Mom, a little test? I bet I can dance without your shoes, darling. Tonight and every night, I answered so confidently. We'll see, Grandpa. But first I need to sing a little, so don't run away now. Can Jiggy sing? She had just a beautiful voice, the few things I've heard from her in the past. Tonight was almost literally the most I've ever heard her say at one time. Usually these were almost monosyllabic answers. It was as if she were painfully shy, a bit of a mystery for such a truly beautiful young woman. It was already a little after 7 in the evening. I had been here since 1 p.m. and nervously waited for Jiggy, but she didn't show up until almost 6 p.m., and then she had her late and light dinner. The band was now in full Zydeco swing mode, and the dance floor was in a transition period between dancing kids and very young teenagers and older, more serious dancers, well, everyone else. The band finished the song, and their leader said, "We have a real treat for you all tonight, a fresh voice that you probably haven't heard before. This is the voice of an angel. It belongs to our relatives and a good friend from Vermilion Parish, Louisiana, Jiggy Landry." And Jiggy walked up to the microphone on the stand. They immediately began creating a ballad that was simply beautiful. And I was simply fascinated and just stood there with my mouth almost open. For a young woman who never talked much at all, she did have the voice of an angel and didn't seem shy at all as she sang in front of about 150 people. Of course, we were all friends and family and almost knew each other, but Jiggy didn't know that. Not really, not yet. I thought this girl was so damn deep. I should have taken this idea much further. Instead, I just kept making assumptions. Assumptions directly based on my own desperate courtship of her. We finally got to the kissing and light caressing stage, but that was it when my own frustration became too much. It was mixed signals. The little progress I thought we both had made towards a real deep relationship and even love, her sudden departure, and then my own reaction to it. It was unlike any other woman I had ever known, and even stranger than Miriam, who had grown up in a completely different culture, Arab and Islamic Iraq. Finally, almost impulsively, I just walked out and flat out asked her to marry me after just 4 months of this whatever it was. It wasn't some big romantic setup that I tried because I was pretty sure she would just say no and then I could move on again. The same plan I had come up with just 4 months ago at that monthly party at Jeffrey's. I assumed she would refuse, but she looked me straight in the eye with the most piercing and wistful look I have ever seen on another person and quietly whispered, "Yes, my dear Sherry, yes, yes, I hope I can make you happy." And I kissed her and felt the most passionate response that I have ever felt, not only from her, but from any woman, and at the same time I felt her tears flowing down her cheeks and mixing with mine. I only assumed that these were tears of great joy, mostly like mine, but some of my tears also finally released the last bit of my demons surrounding Miriam. Why did I never think that Jiggy might have had her own demons in her past? I continued to make assumptions until their combined weight hit me like a truck, and my beloved Jiggy walked out of my life. Our year of marriage started off great and just kept getting better. Because of her shyness, I decided that our sex life might be moving a little slowly and decided to take my time with Jiggy, no matter the cost. Surprisingly, she was still a virgin, and I took care of that on our wedding night. What's even more amazing is that she immediately started having sex with more enthusiasm and energy from that very first time. That's all there is to taking it slow. Sometimes I felt more like a grandfather in this regard, but she was never insatiable. But when I arrived, she settled down next to me, just purred contentedly, and soon fell asleep, and if I wanted more, she was just as enthusiastic as before. She never said no, I mean never. She started talking about our kids almost from day one, and we never used birth control. We were both Catholics, of course, but that wasn't the point. She just wanted kids, and so did I. But she didn't get pregnant right away, and neither of us worried. She was only 21 years old, and I was a young 34. There was plenty of time, and we enjoyed our wonderful life. Then my old boss and best friend from his army days, John Thornton, came to Mobile to get away from his own new problems and demons. We never talked about Miriam or Haran, of course, and little about our bad days in Iraq. I was shocked and saddened more than anything by how Jack Carter treated John. I just couldn't understand how he could do that, but we didn't spend much time discussing it. Then things got serious and our SWAT team got into trouble when Karen Rigby was shot during a robbery at Butler's lawyer's office. Both John and I got very busy trying to find the scoundrels who shot Karen and killed rookie Mobile PD Jim Bast. Jiggy seemed nervous and a little unsure of herself these days. Her personality seemed to blossom over our year of marriage, and she seemed much more outgoing and confident. Her singing and greater inclusion in our all-Creole community around Mobile was part of that, and so was our marriage and my love for her, I hope. But with her increased confidence came a certain character and occasional expression of disappointment. It didn't bother me. I was happy because I saw her growth in this. However, John's late-night call with an emergency training session in Mobile Bay angered her. "Damn it, Benji, you're hardly ever home anymore, and I need to have fun. You knew we were all supposed to go tonight, Jenny and Carla, and my sister and their boyfriends. Damn that John." "Ah, honey, don't blame John. There's more to it than just training tonight. It's important, but I understand that it doesn't change how you feel. I'll make it up to you very soon, I promise, and you go and have fun with them today. Okay, honey? Please have fun." I didn't think about it then. I later learned that her sister Francie was also left without a date, and Francie and Jiggy ended up going together to the Marriott Hotel Lounge to listen to music that wasn't just Zydeco. Such was the story of Francie. In fact, this wasn't the first time they did this, and they were meeting people they both already knew well. Jiggy came home after me and was obviously drunk. I was really tired, but she wasn't, and we had pretty good sex, which she initiated. She let me sleep longer than usual in the morning and was already gone when I woke up. She left me a note that said, "Important shopping for Francie. She needs my help today. I'll be back around 2. Love, your dear," and a heart. Sure enough, at 1:30 I got a call from John, assembling the entire tactical team SWAT for a possible raid on the group of robbers who shot Karen and Jim. It was a fair raid based on a good tip. In fact, John's plan last night had worked almost perfectly. The only thing that was not perfect about our raid was the damn 7 by 28 bullets from the P90 that pierced my lower abdomen. It didn't hurt much, and I never really worried about it personally. I was more afraid of Jiggy's reaction. It was good news, bad news. I would be home a lot more over the next month or two, but I wouldn't be able to have much fun or make love for most of that time. Fate can sometimes be so treacherous and cruel. The operation went well. I was not fully conscious enough to intervene. When I finally started to come to my senses, naturally I asked about Gigi. She soon came in and cried. "Oh, honey, don't cry. I'm fine. Well, I will be fine in a month or 2. My poor bride looked terrible. She sobbed and almost stuttered, trying to say something, but could not say it. I saw one of the nurses looking at her, and she shook her head slightly. Jiggy saw this and finally relaxed and simply said, "I love you, Benji, and always will. Please remember that," she said, grabbing my hand and hanging her head, crying silently. It struck me how stressful and difficult this must be for my young wife. I've been in dangerous situations so many times that I don't think about it anymore. Sure, I flinched before any potential combat situation and shook a little when it was over and I came off the adrenaline, but anxiety or fear was not part of the equation for me. Those who simply wait may actually be in a much worse position. I felt really bad for putting her through that and even a little ashamed for getting shot. Damn, this shouldn't have happened. Jiggy, darling, please don't cry. Really, everything is fine. I feel fine, there's not even any pain right now, and I'll sleep all night. Once I'm in my room and asleep, you go home and take care of yourself. Please?" Then the nurse said, He's right, Honey, except he's already in his room for the night here. This is the emergency room and just a precaution for today. He's not in critical condition or anything. He just needs to wake up from the anesthesia before we let him go back to sleep, which is what he needs now. I'll be right here if you need anything. I soon fell asleep with a smile on my face. The last thing I saw before falling asleep was Jiggy's beautiful face, and the last thing I felt was her loving hand. Jiggy. I looked at my lover and felt sadder than ever in my difficult young life. Benji has done so much for me and helped me heal and grow more than he will probably ever know. But it was all this kindness from him to me that might be causing him a little pain right now. But I continued to convince myself that he would soon get over the breakup with me. I hoped he wouldn't do it, but I knew he might when I left him and moved to Hollywood. I didn't know his whole past life, but I thought I knew enough that he was once an almost insatiable ladies' man and probably slept with hundreds of women and still could whenever he wanted. I slept only with my Benji and could only be satisfied with his love if I could be sure of his constant love for me. But there was so much I was missing, and so much I now wanted just some life experiences away from Cajun country, and I was under the spell of a wonderful man. A man who was even more remarkable than Benji and impressive in some ways. Jenny didn't believe me when I told her that yesterday I was at a screen test when they were so desperate to tell me that Benji was injured, but it was really true. Well, in a way. Francie and I met with the pre-production team about 3 weeks ago. The main actor Ryan Rickards was with them, trying to absorb atmosphere and even dialect while looking at additional possible locations. Principal photography was to take place in the New Orleans area. It was supposed to be a remake of The Big Easy, with Ryan playing the lead role previously played by Dennis Quaid as Cajun Lieutenant Detective Remy McSwain. Francie and I walked into the Marriott Hotel lobby for the second time. For both of us, it was just a chance to relax and get away from everyone else a little. Francie was 2 years older than me and had never been married. She was 14 years old when our father was killed while hunting alligators. Our mother and the whole family were very devastated, but perhaps for me it was the worst of all. Then, 3 years later, I was almost attacked by 4 thugs at my public high school. They were illegal immigrants from Guatemala and wanted MS-13 individuals. The football coach and a couple of his star players stepped in and saved me. I fought them with all my might until one of them pulled out a knife and put it to my throat. Then I froze, and one of them pulled my jeans off and was reaching for my panties when the trainer appeared and stopped it. The guy with the knife yelled, "Get him!" And they all ran after the coach, but they didn't see the star QB and his best friend, the linebacker defensive back, standing right behind the coach. It was a punk massacre. The trainer broke the knife owner's arm in self-defense, but got into trouble when it became a matter of Latino activists. The coach lost his job, but Catholic HS in the same parish hired him, and several of his stars followed him, including some of his best Latino players who were not punks. Many people in the community donated money to help poor children pay for private tuition. Catholic HS owned the community football-wise for many years after that. The coach was a really good coach and just a good person. But my mother and her new husband, my stepfather, pulled me out of school. He was a good guy and treated us all very well, but he still wasn't a dad and wisely never tried to be one. I was supposed to be homeschooled back then, but that didn't really happen and no one ever really tested me. Perhaps they were justifiably embarrassed. Anyway, all of this together was the main reason why I was so inexperienced and shy around boys and then men. I never had the opportunity to grow through experience, and mostly men were just threats or disappointments. I mean, intellectually I knew that Dad didn't want to get eaten by the alligator and left me on purpose, but emotionally the feeling of abandonment was there. My Benji saved me and fixed me in many ways, but I should never have married him because I was still in the girl stage emotionally when I met him. A girl who just wanted her dad and his love for her back. And now I was suddenly much older, but felt like I had missed out on so much and needed to learn so much more about the world. Benji had already seen and done a lot. He had traveled around the United States and even Europe, where his Iraq deployment center was located, plus all those women he was with. I believed that Benji truly loved me more than anyone else. I was the only one he married, but I didn't really believe that my own love for Benji was real, and especially above all others. Because I have never had a relationship like this with any other man, not even the first puppy love. This star QB kind of fell in love with me and tried to meet me. He even tracked me to our little house near the marshes when I left school and my mother invited him inside. He tried to talk to me, but I was too embarrassed and shy to even look at him. He actually tried for about 2 months, but then he just had to let it go. Now I sometimes think about him. He became a true star at LSU and was even selected in the second round of the NFL draft. He hasn't been as successful yet as Brett Favre, another Cajun QB, but he's hung in there and waited for his chance, and has already had a couple of really good games as a replacement. So I was happy in my life with Benji and in general, but I wasn't satisfied. Sigh. Why isn't just some measure of happiness enough? His partner had just come down really bad with the flu or food poisoning or something, and he vomited that day. Uncle Joey begged Dad not to do this, just wait one more day until he felt better. Dad didn't do this until his sophomore year, and the learning curve to do it right could be very steep and very tough. Something like scuba diving or rock climbing, only much, much worse. His foot probably just slipped off the gunwale of the boat as he tried to lift the 250-pound gator's head, so he could get a clean shot with his 30-30 carbine into the quarter-size sweet spot. It was this place on the back of the head that immediately killed the alligator with minimal damage to the rest of the valuable carcass. One small slip of the foot, and he could have been knocked down as the heavy alligator continued to thrash about. And if the alligator had grabbed his arm or leg, it would have pulled him under the water and drowned him. I heard Uncle Joey talking to other men after the funeral, memorial service. Many of these men had visible scars on their arms from close calls. It is unlikely that experienced hunters will hunt alone. That's how they got the experience. Even the $2,000 to $3,000 a day they could make by catching 10 normal mix alligators on a good day simply wasn't worth the risk. It's better to split it in half each day, sharing the danger and the hard work. Pumping up over 2,000 pounds of alligator in one day is no easy job. I will say that it was not worth the risk. Just ask me, I wanted to scream. But then all I could do was cry. I don't think Francie meant it. She had some real harm in mind. We were sisters and we loved each other, but we were completely different. She was just trying to protect me and maybe prepare me for if or when Benji fell into one of his old habits and messed up with some other bimbo. There really were a lot of them, as I became convinced after Francie started pointing them out every time we all went out drinking and dancing. I don't think it ever occurred to me that I might have been such a bimbo or might have seemed like one when Francie and I only went to the same bars together. Yes, dumb, huh? But she planted some seeds of doubt in my mind, even below the conscious part, and they began to germinate little by little when suddenly Benji seemed to just go away a lot more than before and often at night when it was good. Has he started cheating on me? Was he going to leave me? The first time Francie and I went out alone, some guys came up to us and finally let a couple of the nicest ones buy us a drink and just talk to us. A year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this at all. Looked into the eyes of strangers and even talked to them and even laughed and joked a little. Francie danced with both of them that night, but I refused. They were nice guys and it was just fun. No harm, no crime. The second time we went out, we met the film production team and Ryan. They noticed us sitting at a table. In fact, I think Ryan noticed me and sent one of his subordinates, a friendly female producer's assistant with business cards, to invite us to join him. They were all very nice and friendly. Nobody acted arrogantly, like, we're big shots from Hollywood and you're hillbillies. Ryan in particular seemed fascinated by me, and I enjoyed it, I confess. He was just handsome and attractive, and somehow so damn sexy to me. And he was absolutely sweet and attentive, and a little flirtatious. He wanted to hire us both as guides and consultants for the mobile area and especially the Creole subculture. Finally, he asked, "Do you happen to know any Cajun cops?" Francie and I just looked at each other and laughed. Finally, I said, "Well, I know my husband pretty well. He is an experienced SWAT officer in the Mobile Police Department's Tactical Response Unit." "Dude, this is great. You must tell me everything about him. Don't you want to meet him and directly ask him whatever you want?" I was sure that was exactly what he wanted to do. "Well, not quite. I'd rather just hear everything from you. Your impressions and feelings about what he does. How does all this affect you and other family and friends, you know? This would be better for me when I try to get into my role." I was already hypnotized by him and did not notice the sly grins of most of his circle. They ended up offering us $50 an hour per person for any time we could spare over the next week to help them. They also promised to cover all expenses, such as providing transportation and paying for food and drinks while we were working. Francie worked as a waitress and her hours were flexible with little advance notice, but I didn't work at all. During the day, I could be available as much as they wanted. And apparently they, that is Ryan, who was running the show, really wanted me to spend at least 4 hours every day for the next 5 days. Francie worked the first 4 hours, but couldn't do the rest. Ryan and I were never officially alone together that first week, but it really seemed to me that we were communicating face to face. I was simply drawn to him, and his bright blue eyes grew bigger and deeper as the week went by. Maybe it was because my face was getting closer and closer to his as our conversations became more personal and intimate, and my body also continued to approach. Somehow, I even started talking and bragging about my sex life with my husband. He was very interested, but only smiled at me condescendingly in a sense. He's probably had 1,000 women in bed in different ways and knows more about sex than I will ever know, I started to think. And I noticed that I get excited thinking about it, about Ryan and his sex life. I began to blush furiously, and Ryan noticed this and just smiled a little more. But he didn't tease me and even kindly changed the subject. French. The next morning, I woke up in my IQ bed in severe pain. I think I called the nurse to talk about some painkillers. I woke up around 2 a.m. in pain, and I swear the nurse flirted with me before taking care of the pain. Breakfast soon arrived and was very light. I'll be on a mostly liquid diet for the next couple of days. I'll probably be very grouchy, but I'll do my best. Poor Jiggy and I chuckled to ourselves. Jiggy arrived at 10 a.m. "Hello, beautiful." I tried to be as optimistic and pleasant as possible. She didn't smile back. "Benji, honey, I'm so sorry, but today I'm leaving for Hollywood. I met some people. Well, I met a man, a Hollywood actor, and I'm going back to Hollywood with him. Going to include me in your next photo. I have an agent and a signed contract, and the whole deal is done, and it all happened so quickly. I don't want to leave you and our marriage. I was hoping you would just do it. Came with me to Hollywood when I finally got up the courage to tell you. But now you've gone, shot yourself, and are stuck here." It all came out very quickly and almost in one breath, and ended almost with a scream. I could read between the lines quite well, thank you. Whether she knew it or not, she was hanging around here. He is trying to let down not only me, but also himself. She hoped to have her cake and eat it too. She hoped I wouldn't make a fuss and wouldn't just say no. That I would let her go and still love her and be a parachute available for her to land softly if her new life wasn't so gorgeous after all. My poor Jiggy. She just didn't know what she was doing to me and to us. I never told her about Miriam. A lot was going through my mind at that moment, even though my thinking was dulled by the opiates I was taking for the pain. "You signed the contract, right? What about this contract, your marriage vows, have you signed with me yet?" I said as softly as I could. She blushed deeply and looked down like a little girl caught doing something bad or stupid. I knew what her decision would be, no matter what else I said now. I knew what she had already done or was going to do as soon as she arrived in Los Angeles. She was going to get Mr. Hollywood actor asshole into bed. I was suddenly glad that she never got pregnant. "Goodbye, Jiggy," I whispered quietly to myself. What's his name? I asked again carefully. Now she looked me in the eye and clearly said, Ryan Rickards. I don't think I've heard of him. Maybe I'll recognize it when I Google it. Well, you signed the contract. I think it's time for you to go. Goodbye. I didn't say her name, and she was no longer my share or anyone else I cared about. At least she admitted it. She burst into tears and left the room. She didn't look back. We both had a completely new life ahead of us. I was sure that my fate would be even sadder. Perhaps she would be happier. But for some reason I doubted it. Poor Jiggy. My day nurse saw her cry when she left. She was actually very nice. She came straight to me to check. Are you all right? Is there anything I can do for you? She asked sympathetically. Well, maybe in about a month. I smiled at her as best I could. She looked at me very seriously. It's a date. Be on it. And she smiled and wiggled her butt at me as she walked out. Thank heaven for good workers, I thought. I told Benji the news, and he seemed to take it quite well. He didn't break down or get angry. So why did I cry almost hysterically as I left his room? Why did I feel the same way I did when my dad died? Benji isn't dead, and he'll be okay. That's what the doctor said. But it seemed like he just left. I wanted to reassure Benji that this was only a temporary separation. I just didn't know how long it took to shoot a film, so I didn't know how long temporary could be. And Benji didn't seem interested in discussing it. Oh, he'll get over it soon, I told myself. I will call him every day. I had to sit in the car for 20 minutes before I calmed down enough to feel it was safe to drive. Thinking about Friday night and then Saturday afternoon helped me a lot. Friday night Benji was at that stupid training session, so Francie and I went back to the Marriott to meet Ryan and his people. We had a couple drinks and just joked and talked about the film and my role. Ryan said it was a done deal, and the head producer already told the writers to add my character. I was supposed to be Lieutenant Ramai's ex-girlfriend, a Zydeco singer, and be part of a romantic triangle with his new girlfriend, a sexy female lawyer, likely to be played by Rachel McAdams. It was between our dances. Ryan was more into slow dancing, and I really enjoyed slow dancing with him too. Later, when Francie was busy with a new acquaintance, Ryan quietly led me out, and we went up to his room for a more private conversation. Listen, the producer is excited about you just from the photos and videos I already sent him on the phone. But there is one thing we need to discuss and make sure we are on the same page. This movie will be a bolder remake. Big Lung and the producer and director want an R rating. That means some pretty explicit sex scenes and even some nudity. It'll be artistic, but still erotic. Are you okay with that? Do you think you can handle the fake love scenes with me being mostly or completely naked, like Hal Berry in Monsters Ball? So, I smiled at him. I think I can handle this. Should we practice like in rehearsal? I even batted my eyelashes. Ryan grabbed me and kissed me passionately. He helped me take off my clothes. He took a few more photographs of me for the producer and director, and we did everything except sex for about an hour. I had the disturbing thought that this might be the last time I would have sex with my husband, but I pushed away these negative thoughts. And then on Saturday, for almost 4 hours, Ryan and I rehearsed again. This time he was completely naked, and I really loved the look, the feel. We worked on simulating intercourse quite a lot. I was still trying to convince myself that I hadn't actually cheated on Benji. It was just my new job that wasn't the least bit vulgar. It was art. Yes, I was a stupid, approachable girl. I was looking forward to another great final sex with Benji that night, and after I fucked his brains out, I would tell him all about Hollywood and, of course, convince him to come with me. That's why my phone was turned off all day and I couldn't be reached. And Benji getting shot meant all my plans were in vain anyway. As if Benji would ever agree to this. I never asked myself the main question, would he agree to my new highly paid career or to me cheating on him? What was I really planning? I didn't want to face the obvious, it was both. I only had enough time to pack one suitcase and meet Ryan at the Marriott by 3 p.m. Francie was supposed to take me there. Just one suitcase, because Ryan and his people were going to give me brand new stuff when we got to Los Angeles. In the car, Francie asked me a surprising question. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, honey?" "What? You're the one who pushed me towards this, always told me what a great opportunity it was. I'll be a star with my beauty and voice once I get there and they see me. So why the hell are you asking questions like that now?" "Well, it's just that now Benji is all shot, and he probably really needs you. And I know that he loves you very much. I was always sure that he would go with you and look after you." "Don't worry. Ryan's going to look after me now, and he'll do it. I've got it wrapped around my little finger. You'll see. And he knows everything about Hollywood, and he's rich and quite powerful. He's a star. People love him, the public." I felt much better and completely normal when I was with Ryan again. And just 3 hours later, I was half drunk on Delta Airlines vodka, and I joined the Mile High Club as he had sex with me in one of those little toilets. God, it was so fun and relaxing. And yes, this was practically the climax of the rest of the story, or in this case, the rest of my life. I immediately moved in with Ryan, and we had sex like bunnies, rehearsing for about 2 weeks before he started getting bored with me. In fact, just 2 weeks. But this was enough to get me pregnant. I wasn't worried about contraception since I had sex with Benji regularly and never got pregnant with my true love. There must have been something wrong with him, or some incompatibility between us, or maybe it was just another little irony of Mother Nature. But God, I learned a lot in those 2 weeks and after. Ryan tried to keep me happy and at least somehow interested in me by expanding my sexual horizons. At first, it was a threesome with another married woman in her 30s. Then it was a threesome with another man. After the three of us, it was the four of us. I was starting to get tired of all this sex anyway, and then I understood. This was poor Ryan's main problem. He just had a naturally low libido. He needed a special excitement to have sex at all. Ever since he hit puberty, all sorts of older girls and even women had made themselves available to him without any effort on his part other than unzipping his pants. And many women did all this for him too. His life was a fantasy for most men, but it's all one big paradox. More irony from Mother Nature. The main reason he pursued me was because I was already married and never made myself available to him. I was his fantasy woman, a very beautiful and sexy woman who resisted him, and he had to seduce her. This was what piqued his interest and recharged him. A week or two of chastity and chasing was what recharged his own limited sexual potential. Of course, once he seduced me, and after 2 weeks of daily sex, his batteries ran low and he needed a new challenge. Meanwhile, I developed a crush on him, and I didn't think about Benji even once, much less call him every day. I didn't call Benji or anyone else from my old life. This new life was too exciting and busy, and I was in love. Because when I wasn't having sex, I was busy with other things. Lots of photo sessions, lots of tests in front of the camera, some diction lessons and initial acting lessons. Basically, the coaching director wanted me to remain as natural as possible. Of course, great acting is really about staying normal in front of the camera, and my singing career also began to develop. The last script with my scenes included was received. I had quite a significant presence. 2 long love sex scenes where I'm completely naked in both. 1 full song scene in a Zydeco restaurant, and 1 dramatic confrontation between my character and the female aita co-star. I was supposed to be paid $100,000 for my role, and I was also supposed to get Introducing Jiggy Landry credits. I decided to use my maiden name as my acting name. I often appeared in public with Ryan, enough to attract the attention of the paparazzi and be photographed, and then mentioned in some tabloids as Ryan's new flame. I think Ryan's agent made sure this was noticed on purpose. In Hollywood, it's constant PR, and it's never too early to start making buzz about an upcoming big movie. The film was practically a disaster. Production began after a month of delay. Rachel McAdams dropped out of the project, and the replacement lead actress was almost an A-lister, but no longer in her prime. She was 35 years old, but I swear she looked 60 without makeup. It took several hours of makeup work to make her look less than 40 years old on screen. Ryan looked like a teenager next to her in every frame. There seemed to be no chemistry between them. By this time, I was already starting to show a little when I was naked, and the director noticed this. Ryan was tasked with informing me. He did it so sweetly and tenderly one day before filming started. Either you have an abortion or you don't participate in the film. Yes, briefly and clearly. So I had an abortion. I didn't even think about it at the time. The film was the key to my new life and my future happiness. By then, I realized that Ryan was not this and could never be. He had great sex for a while, but the concept of true love or even commitment was not in his mental lexicon. He couldn't even hug. It was as if he couldn't tolerate being touched by another person unless it was related to sex. It just wasn't in his nature, and it probably never would be. I had to admit that he could do a good job of pretending and acting normal as part of his seduction technique. Perhaps he was a psychopathic personality type. More Mother Nature irony. I wanted more experience and development, and of course, I achieved it. Physically, the abortion wasn't that bad. Some women I know in Los Angeles told me it would be like having a really bad period for the day. And physically, it was something like this. But this plunged me into depression, which slowly only got worse. I couldn't play at all anymore. Even those hot nude sex scenes on screen were anything but passionate, and I couldn't sing anymore. My angel voice just disappeared, and I couldn't get it back, and I didn't even really want to sing. My role in the film was significantly reduced, and I lost those important performance credits. My salary was cut in half in accordance with all points of the contract. In fact, my 15 minutes of fame ended after just 6 months in Hollywood. I was politely invited to come out by Ryan, and he helped me by organizing his team to collect all my belongings and changing all the locks as soon as I left the house. All this time, Ryan was somewhere inspecting the next filming location. The Big Easy remake never received a wide release, only going straight to PPV and DVD. He was a candidate for the Golden Raspberry Award in every category, and everyone associated with him wanted to forget about it as quickly as possible. Well, I've finally grown up, 100%. I became much older and wiser, and boy, was I pleased. Of course, I wasn't the least bit happy anymore. It's time to return home. Home. What a joke. I meant it was time to leave California. I called Francie and spoke to her for only the third time in 6 months. She didn't seem particularly interested, much less worried. What happened to me? I couldn't even blame it on drugs. I never got into that scene. I was just pumped up with life. Of course. How's Benji? Does he ever think about me? I asked. I couldn't resist. I was thinking more and more about Benji now. Indeed, since I had an abortion. Benji is totally fine. And no, he never mentioned your name. At least not to me. And I should probably tell you. I slept with him for a while. Just a friends with benefits relationship. Ah then, well, I just can't believe you were ever stupid enough to give it all up. I would have married him in a heartbeat if he had asked me, and never let him out of my sight. Really, I think I remember how you helped me be so stupid back then. I think we both learned something. Are you going to meet me at the airport or not, sister? Yes, of course. What time? Where are you staying? Well, a little with you, maybe. Please. In my wretched little apartment. Are you sure? I thought you were rich now and would start with a suite at a Marriott. I'm not broke, but I'm not rich either. I'll look for a job now. But I'd like to just spend time with my big sister, please. Okay, sure, I'll meet you at the airport. I'll be waiting for you at baggage claim 30 minutes after your scheduled arrival time. Bye. Looks like I've burned a lot of bridges in search of satisfaction. In the car on the way to Francie's apartment, I started trying to repair some bridges. So, is Benji really okay? He didn't miss me at all, even in the beginning. Is that why he never called me or even thought about coming for me and getting me back? Do you remember that Benji was shot and in the hospital when you left him? It hurted me. I never left him, and I told him that day that I wanted him to come to California with me. But he got shot, and so we broke up temporarily. Well, it temporarily ended, and now I'm back. Francie looked at me with a shocked expression. Oh God, you think Benji will take you back? Oh honey, he'll never touch you again. That's a fact. You'll be lucky if he even talks to you just politely. My heart sank. I thought I had already reached the bottom, but the floor fell out from under me, and now I was in free fall. And yet I couldn't believe it. It was as if my dad suddenly and completely stopped loving me. He will never do this. He just can't. But he loves me. I know he does. It may take a while, but I know he will forgive me eventually and hug me again. Oh, baby, he really loves you and forgave you a long time ago, but you still know almost nothing about men. Well, good men, like Dad was and Frenchie is, he never told you about Miriam, really. Miriam. Who is Miriam, one of his exes, who was the best in bed? Well, after what I've learned in the last 6 months, I'm no worse, I'm sure. And I said it proudly, without even blushing. Francie looked a little shocked, but mostly just sad. Miriam was the only other girl he ever loved and asked to marry him. You replaced Miriam a year ago and threw it all away like it was nothing. I began to squirm in the seat and almost suffocate. Why didn't I ever know about this before? When Benji Frenchie to me, we had a 2-week affair, we talked a lot. I told him a lot about your past that you apparently didn't tell him, and he told me something that he didn't tell you. These were past and very painful memories for him. He lost Miriam too, but she didn't just leave him. It was while he was in Iraq. They fell in love, but they were both attacked while they were in bed together for the first time. She was tortured, abused, and killed in front of him while he was tied up. They probably were going to kill him, and he even looked forward to death. His only regret was not killing them all personally by dying, but John Thornton, and his other comrades found him and saved him. The man most responsible was killed soon after, but John's pain and guilt for what happened to Miriam never left him. John told me that he never expected to feel the joy of life again after Miriam, and he didn't feel it until you showed up, and you gave him a whole year of this joy, and he will never regret it and will always remember it with warmth. But it's all over. At least you left voluntarily and weren't forcibly taken away by someone else, and he felt a little guilty about that, having been shot and pretty helpless and unable to do anything again when the woman he really loved left him life. I cried. But I didn't leave his life. I'm alive and back, and I never stopped loving him, and we can be happy and enjoy being together again. And I will explain that in fact I was forcibly taken away by that snake Ryan. He just charmed me and undermined my will and did it cunningly. Benji will understand. I said, sobbing. If you had returned, or at least called him, in the first month. If you had returned home after 2 months, you might have had a chance. But after 6 months of no contact with you, not a word that you even called me or someone else and asked about him. It's all dead now, dear. And I'm very sorry, sister, but that's the way it is now. Well, let's see. Maybe Francie thought she still had a chance with him herself. Most of what she said had a ring of truth to it, of course, but perhaps she misunderstood Benji's feelings for me a little. I wasn't going to give up. Home is where they should let you in when you show up. Or maybe not. Frenchie. It's been almost 7 months since Gigi left, and I heard the rumor. Gigi is back in town. Maybe she was just visiting her sister. I hadn't seen or spoken to Francie since I last slept with her, and she wanted to talk about a deeper connection between us, and I rejected her. I just wasn't interested. This wasn't going to happen. As far as I knew, I was, surprisingly, still married to Gigi. Almost every day I expected to be served with divorce papers, and it never happened. I guess I was Catholic enough that I just didn't go there myself. I mean, I wasn't particularly religious, but I went to Mass fairly regularly, at least once a week, sometimes twice, and tried to go to confession at least once a month. I committed several deadly sins and really hoped for mercy in the end. I would choose God's judgment over Jesus' mercy every damn time. I forgave Jiggy a long time ago. I never reached the hate stage, and after I got to know Francie a lot better intimately, she told me all the sad basics about Jiggy's life before me during some conversations in bed. I didn't know any of this. I was really stupid and just assumed too much. Mrs. Thornton, John's wife, Susan, was a great help here. Because of her own psychological problems and the trials she gave John, then her own conversion to Catholicism and interest in theology and apologetics, plus her continued reading on psychiatry and even her close friendship with her doctor Rachel, she knew a lot that seemed to fit Jiggy and I and our demons, both personal and shared. My conversations with her really helped, really calmed me down. And I trusted her and never noticed any indication from John that Susan was telling him anything in detail about what we were discussing. It was as if she had absorbed that private and privileged atmosphere of professional consultants, be they medical or religious. She had no degrees or certifications from any authority. What she was an intelligent woman who read and thought a lot, and just a very good woman with hard-won personal wisdom. I envied John in many ways. What a 180-degree turnaround from a year ago when John was jealous of me and my very happy marriage with Gigi, and I regretted what Susan gave him. Never bet on the future. Never. Only fools will do this. Especially fools who bet on the future based on the past. Just live every day. Sigh. Now I could go most days without thinking about Jiggy, but now this rumor, even if completely false, would change that, I knew. Okay. I also knew what to do. Work hard first, then train even harder, and then maybe have one extra beer in the evening if sleep doesn't come quickly enough. But only one. And tomorrow was Friday, and I'd have a couple of drinks with my friends, and maybe I'd get lucky. And 8 days later, another big family monthly party, this time at John and Susan, our most beloved honorary Cajuns. Susan is now highly respected by everyone after her and John's escape from O'Donnell's clutches. Neither John nor Susan ever talked much about the ordeal, but Andy wisely only mentioned to a few how disgusting John O'Donnell looked after Susan was done with him. But it was too good a story not to become something of a common myth in the Cajun community. Sweet little Susan. She was now receiving mixed looks from some of the young men. And no one ever tried to test her character, either. Well, Gigi showed up at that monthly party with Francie. I barely recognized her, and probably wouldn't have recognized her if she hadn't been with Francie. Her hair was bleached and maybe curled or something. They're just laid out differently. She looked older. She was only 22, and I was now 35, and most 22-year-old girls still looked like teenagers to me. But Jiggy looked like a woman, and she seemed very quiet again. She looked a little nervous, as if she didn't belong here. Susan walked up to her and hugged her with a big smile. Jiggy responded with a small smile, and even I relaxed a little. Jiggy was no longer my concern. The fact that this stranger was still my wife seemed almost absurd. I didn't know her, but then I never really knew Jiggy. I was more right than I even knew when I told John the morning she left. She was unreal to me. She was always just a dream. It was true. Stone-cold truth. I didn't say hi to her. Later that night, around 10 p.m., she finally approached me. I didn't even know she was still there. I was just drinking and dancing and being in a good mood. "Hey, Grandpa, think you can keep up with me on the dance floor?" She smiled uncertainty. "No, Miss Landry, I don't think I can do any more. That's a fact." I was distantly polite. She froze for a moment. "Miss Landry, are we divorced?" she almost whispered. "Aren't you the actress Jiggy Landry?" "No, I'm Jiggy Francois, Mrs. Francois. That's all. At least until my husband divorces me," she said dreamily. "Have you seen the movie?" she asked carefully. "No, I've heard of it. I won't watch it. I somehow saw the original better, at least in the part with the naked woman, and live. I'm not interested in watching her hug another man, you know. Maybe you don't understand already. Anyway, I think most of the young guys here have seen him. I imagine you'll be offered a lot of dates if you stay here. Are you going to Hollywood soon? No, I'll never go back to Hollywood or California, basically. I'll just live here, and I don't date. I'm a married woman. She tried to look strong, but in reality she looked like she was about to cry. No one here can compare to that handsome Mr. Rickard for you, I'm sure. I understand. But still, don't look so sad, Mrs. It's a party of good times. By the way, I'm a married man and I go on so many dates with women all the time. My own marriage contract was torn up, invalidated, if not annulled, by the other party, so it's only a marriage in name, now the same with yours. So, enjoy, right? Jiggy blushed deeply. Okay, let me go dance with someone my age, and you really should too. Really. And I left and asked Susan to dance. Susan got it, if anyone here could. She soon calmed me down. At first I was so tense that I couldn't even get into the rhythm, which in Zydeco dancing is on the up side, not the down side. But Susan didn't fight me or try to lead me. She just smiled warmly and tenderly at me, and I straightened out pretty soon. I never saw Jiggy dancing again that night. I think he and Francie are gone. The next 6 months were pretty easy. I saw Jiggy sometimes, almost always with Francie and at masses. Because of my work schedule, which often included weekend shifts, there was never a normal mass that I usually went to. Sometimes it was a Saturday evening, sometimes a Sunday afternoon or Sunday teen mass at 5 p.m. I've seen enough of Jiggy to sometimes wonder if she goes to all the masses all weekend just to maybe catch a glimpse of me. I didn't know where she lived or what she did work or rest. I didn't see her at the other monthly parties and never ran into her at our favorite Cajun Bar's music spots when our little group went out, Jenny, Carla, and Susan and John. Andy and Karen Rigby often joined us now too. I think they had something more serious than what once happened between Karen and me. And Jenny's fiancé is Freddie Shaughnessy. He was not a Cajun, but was of Irish descent. He was a widower veterinarian with an absolutely precious 6-year-old daughter who adored Jenny and vice versa. This sealed the deal for Jenny. Oh, he was a really nice guy too, and could even dance the Cajun pretty well for an Irishman. But we all immediately fell in love with little Maria. I sometimes thought about the children I once dreamed of. And then this whole thing with the terrorists on the cruise ship blew up right here in Mobile Bay. It's been quiet for us SWAT guys since the Butler robbery happened. Almost boring, and some of the younger team members were almost complaining. Not John, not me, not Andy, not Karen. Boring was normal and good for us veterans. John became quite cunning and almost cruel in his off-the-cuff teachings and exercises to keep everyone on their toes. We all thought it was just another drill when the all-hands-on-deck call came on Saturday afternoon. Most probably thought, damn, another weekend ruined by our asshole beloved great leader, I can imagine. But this was not a teaching. An unknown number of intruders hijacked and successfully took control of at least the engineering and captains of one of Carnival Cruise Line ships, now based in Mobile. John contacted our contacts in the U.S. Navy while waiting for the rest of our team to assemble, and we were fortunate that they were able to promise that the SEAL team would be on site in less than 3 hours. We just didn't know if we had that much time. Well, I won't tell you all this now, but I think John was right in deciding that we should board the moving jet using our flexible assault ladders from the mobile police patrol boats. Now we knew that these were terrorists, and they threatened to blow up the entire ship, ram anything, just start mass shooting of passengers, etc., etc., if their demands are not met. The SEAL team was still 20 minutes away when we began our assault. At least we tied them down, kept most of them in place, and stopped the shooting. Most of the bridge crew had already been killed, and several Jewish passengers, who apparently Islamic fanatics were able to identify and capture. But there were more of them than us, and they were well armed, even with RPGs and an unknown amount of explosives. John warned the Navy helicopters of the missiles, and they cautiously approached from a dead aft position while we kept the terrorists' heads down. The SEALs rappelled down safely and began their attacks after brief consultation with John and I to ensure maximum mutual safety and coordination while limiting the possibility of friendly fire errors. They were real professionals, but so were we. John trained us all very well. The terrorists had no chance, and they knew it. Then they decided to commit suicide with explosives, but 4 of us were caught in the explosion. Fortunately, not much. Just a few shrapnel and a concussion. Well, John, Andy, Karen, and I spent the night in the hospital for our efforts. The SEAL Chief Petty Officer came by and promised that we would all meet for drinks and an informal debriefing as soon as we could arrange it after we were discharged. It's going to be an amazing party, and I'm already looking forward to it. In fact, that night in the hospital became an amazing party when all of our families and special ones came to see us. Jenny and her vet, Carla and Susan, Kimberly, JJ, Parker and Abby, and some of the other kids. Andy almost climbed into Karen's bed, until John gave him a slight glare to calm him down with all the kids around. Then I saw Francie and Jiggy outside the door of our room, just watching. Susan saw them and approached them warmly, inviting them inside. The nurses had long since lost control, but they were soon laughing with us, as were some of the doctors who came in by chance. One of the best parties without alcohol. Eventually, she began to calm down. Jiggy finally came to my bed. "Hey, Grandpa. Sorry to come, but I just had to see with my own eyes that you're okay. You look pretty good for an old man." I just smiled at her, but didn't know what to say. Finally, she started talking again. I talked to Susan a little bit. Father Timothy recommended that I do it. He was right. It was good for me in a lot of ways. I learned a lot from her, and in California, and she helped me kind of integrate and expand and further understand so much about this whole Hollywood disaster. It was a terrible mistake I made with my eyes open, however, and I take full responsibility for it. Anyway, I may not have another opportunity like this with you tied down, so please listen to me. I'm truly, truly sorry for what I did to you and to us. Francie told me about Miriam. I'm sorry to even mention her name, but I want you to know that I know now. I'm sorry I didn't know about you and about her before. I don't know if it would have changed my behavior, but I want to believe that yes, please allow me this little consolation of the illusion. She teared up a little, but sort of shook her head and regained her composure. I filed for divorce. No fault and simple. No division of property, no alimony. Considering what I did and considering my mental state when we got married, you should have no problem getting a church annulment if someday you will meet a really good woman and you will fall in love and want to get married again. Both Father Tim and Susan assured me of this. I want you to at least have a chance for this little happiness and joy in the future. What can I do now? Well, that's all I wanted to tell you. But I just pray that we can somehow become just friends or friendly to each other at some point in the future. That may not happen until you meet a really good woman and not find love again. And if so, that will be enough for me. Take care of yourself and be careful, Officer Benjamin Francois. You will soon become a truly free man. And somewhere out there, the future Mrs. Francois is in desperate need. To you, as I once was. She touched my hand briefly, saying goodbye. Then she turned with her head held high and gathered Francie up, and they both left. Susan was still there, talking quietly to John. Jenny and Carla had already taken the children home. Susan kissed John tenderly, but still very passionately in her goodbye. Then she walked past me. "Are you okay, Frenchie?" she asked tenderly. "I'm fine, Susan. Starting to feel tired. It's been a long day." "Okay? Sleep tight," she patted my hand. "I saw Jiggy talking to you. I'm pretty sure I know what she said. We'll have to talk about this soon, okay? Not very soon or anything. When you feel the urge, just let it go and rest tonight. A lot of people really respect and love you. Don't ever forget that, dear. Bye, sweetheart. If John were ever stupid enough to leave you, I'd be first in line, you know." She grinned maliciously. "Oh, I know, dear. I cherish this thought." There was a sparkle in her eyes. We both knew John would never be that stupid. I fell asleep quite easily that night. I was glad Jiggy came and said what she said. We needed to get a divorce and just move on with our lives. Maybe there really was a good woman in my future whom I could love and start a family with children. It's better to live with hope, and not with sadness or anxiety as the main motive. Maybe this good woman will even be Jiggy, the stranger she has become. Maybe. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.